Hello, Internet! Gino, aka that Pinguino, Grieco. This time I'm going to be using my last name, which is interesting and different. Um, Welcome to a new podcast that I'm going to be hosting and having several guests on. Podcast is going to be called Deep Listens, to go along with the deep look videos and the articles and shit that I write. So, is cursing okay? That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. Come on, let's be
Cursing's
frank.
okay?
I was going to ask.
Tasteful cursing.
Tasteful cursing. Okay. The new podcast, Tasteful Cursing. No, I'm kidding. So Deep Listens is going to be a podcast that is kind of like a video game book club. So every week, every 2 weeks, hopefully 2-week schedule, we're going to be playing a new game, either start to finish or start to a reasonable length that we all agree upon. Take some notes, talk about stuff that we thought about while we were playing the game, interesting things. I have some guests. Billy, Old Man Rothert.
Jesus.
Burn gray hair.
I mean, it's distinguished looking. I get compliments. All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? My name is Billy Rothert. I'm also known as Rothgar in many gaming communities. That'll be my gaming handle and just about anything you've seen me in or played games with me in. Most recently, I did the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run with Gino, that Pinguino. He and I raced 2 video games side by side for charity. I won, obviously. And yeah, I've been helping out Gino with some of his deep look content before. Coined the term baby deep look. He did a couple of those too. Those are pretty nice. And yeah, I'm just glad to be on. I'm glad to be on today, talking about one of my absolute favorite games, Shadow of the Colossus, and a very cool concept that we'll be going over very shortly.
And on here to join us, we also have Peter Swole Busby.
That seems like a pretty accurate nickname. Yeah, I think that's right.
As far as strictly muscle definition goes, I guess.
Yeah, I was worried I was getting a little smaller lately, but I appreciate the compliment.
Reading too many books.
So hello, everybody. I'm Pete Busby. I guess I'm known as Pete Busby in gaming circles, if anybody's ever mentioned my name. I am a student of literature working in science fiction, so a lot of overlap in the gaming community, oddly enough. So just here to talk about some games.
Okay, so we've got a philosophy grad student. We've got a person who did undergrad philosophy and plays a lot of video games. And I guess if you need my background in literature stuff, I was a computer science and English double major. So I am used
basically
to talking
nothing
in group settings. Yes. Yeah, basically I don't do shit.
We're explaining it to Gino.
So today's episode is going to be about Shadow of the Colossus, which I think is fitting because, as Billy mentioned, that was the game that he actually beat me in a race in. I was playing Final Fantasy IX, for the record, a longer game than Shadow of the Colossus.
All right, well, I was not playing Shadow of the Colossus once, but as many times as it required to do a very specific, achievement.
Basically, it's for children, is what I'm saying.
Basically,
However,
Final Fantasy IX is a book. You play with the X button.
However, we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff for Shadow of the Colossus, and since Billy was the person who played it most recently and played quite a lot of it, why don't you go ahead and start us off on something you noticed during your 4 playthroughs of that game?
Why stop at 4? I mean, I played the game probably 20 times. So, yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Shadow of the Colossus. It's a great game. One of the, I guess, most, of all the PlayStation 2 titles, I would put this in one of the top lists of made the most impact for games to come. Not necessarily best game or most, top-selling game, but it made a lot of impact outside, within the gaming community and also outside of the gaming community. For example, I guess let me just intro the game first. For anybody who doesn't know, Shadow of the Colossus was released in 2005 on the PlayStation 2. It was directed by Fumito Ueda. The game's storyline is basically this. There's a young man named Wander who enters a forbidden land. Wander travels across a vast expanse of world on horseback and has to defeat 16 massive beings known as the Colossi. The whole motive behind his mission or journey is that he's trying to bring back to life this young maiden, this young girl, and he's struck up a deal with this deity who makes the following agreement. If you go kill these 16 beings, I will bring this girl back to life. What makes this game interesting and stands out from other games of that time period and other games in general is that it was designed by subtracting as many conventional pieces of gameplay as possible, like leaving with it almost like the bare minimum. There's no towns, there's no dungeons to crawl through, there's no characters with which to speak or interact with, or I should say absolutely minimalist. And there's basically no actual enemies or like NPC enemies to fight. There's only 16 boss battles and basically vast expanses of what appears to be nothing in between. So that's the game we're going to be talking about today.
Yep, and just, I guess I should have mentioned this before, but there's going to be spoilers. We're talking about everything regarding these games. Everything is fair play.
Yeah,
So,
if you're anti-spoiler, just be warned right now.
Yeah, this
I mean,
game's
really,
like 10 years old. Get on that.
They're more explainers than spoilers, though. I mean, we're not spoiling the experience. We're enhancing.
True. I guess none of the things that I want to talk about are the ending of the game. If you listen to this whole podcast, I don't plan on talking about stuff that would be like the good twist at the end. So there is a cool twist at the end. I don't think I'll get to it. It really doesn't make any difference with the content that we're going to go over today.
All right, cool. So why don't you kick us off? And so like you mentioned, Shadow of the Colossus is it's almost a deconstruction of a lot of game storylines and kind of difficulty and experience curves, rather than having a slow build up to a boss fight with that being the climax. Shadow of the Colossus is just kind of nothing but climaxes. It is the best sexual experience you've ever had. It's just nothing but climaxes.
Yeah, I guess.
So
the best sexual experience you've ever had playing with yourself.
Don't worry about it. So it kind of breaks a lot of the like you said, a lot of the conventions of a game. And I think you mentioned, what was that philosophical term you mentioned for?
All right, so we'll intro the philosophical term in just a second. Well, actually, yeah, we can just hit it now. The philosophical term is called mereological essentialism. And I'll break it down. So mereology is basically the study of a whole and its relation to its many parts. So it's like there's maybe like an assembly of objects. Mereology is the study of how the parts relate to the whole itself. And when someone says mereological essentialism, they're talking about this view that if one object were to lose or gain some part, that object, like the original object, would cease to exist. It would no longer exist. That is, like, it would no longer be the original object, but it'd be like a completely new, different object. There's a couple of great examples to go through. We're going to talk about Shadow of the Colossus as a video game as an example, but there's another couple great examples to touch on. So before we get too into detail, that's, I guess, the general overview, what I mean when I say mereological essentialism. But for ease of access, I can just talk about it in the following phrase, like part-whole theory.
Why don't you give like an example of something that if you took a part away, it would no longer be what it was?
So here's a pretty decent example. For example, if you have like an orchestra, like a musical orchestra, it's going to include people that play violins and play cellos and other string instruments. It's going to include brass. It's going to include trumpets and whatever. It's going to include percussion instruments, drums, and other, like xylophone kind of stuff, whatever you might have in your orchestra that are other percussion instruments besides drums.
Mine's nothing but xylophones.
Yeah, so anyway,
xylophone
basically you could have what's called an orchestra, and if one person in the violin group got sick that night and couldn't come, like, that doesn't mean it's not an orchestra anymore. It's still an orchestra minus one violinist. But if you take away so many musicians from that group, you might not be able to call it an orchestra anymore. For example, if it loses its entire string section and it's only like brass and percussions, you might not be able to call it an orchestra anymore.
Yeah,
because it's lost an essential piece.
That's it. It's the means of sort of getting to the essence of something. Like,
right.
How many parts can you strip away and something still be the same thing? Like, you see it a lot in studies of, like, what is human? Like, how many aspects of humans could you take away and they still be human? Like, what if they didn't have memories, didn't have speech?
Okay, so at a certain point, it ceases to be an orchestra and it becomes Johnny the saxophone guy.
Right, and
And that's not the same thing.
maybe someone who's like
Much as we
really,
all love
really
John.
into music and knows all this stuff will say, well, excuse me, gentlemen, in order for it to be an orchestra, you must have 13 violin, maybe there's some hard definition out there, but I don't know it. Maybe they would call it, like a smaller orchestra just turns into an ensemble.
Okay, so
Or like a group,
how does this relate to Shadow of the Colossus, I may ask?
It doesn't.
Great.
We just wanted to.
Yeah, right. So the directors and the developers of Shadow of the Colossus, and you'll actually find a lot of this information if you go out and get the new. I shouldn't say it's new, but they released a remastered HD version of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. The games are related; they're like sister titles, brother-sister titles. In the, I guess, bonus content of the HD remix of that game, there's commentary from the developers that said, hey, we were trying to build a game that just conveyed like a raw experience and took away a lot of what is conventionally in other games. So, for example, Shadow of the Colossus has a world and a protagonist and a goal, I guess like some motive, something that you're trying to reach, but nothing else really. Like there is a world, a person, a motive, and very little else. There's no towns, there's no root town, there's no traveling from different cities like there is in like maybe like a Final Fantasy game, or even in like a Super Mario game where you have like World 1-1, World 1-2, like World 2-3. Like there's, you like travel across a map. There's none of that in this game. It's just a world. And in fact, you have access to the entire world from the very beginning of the game. Almost, I should say like 99% of the world you can access. There's only like the final boss you can't get to. But other than that, it's just like giant sandbox, just a giant world.
And you're really not even oriented when you start Shadow of the Colossus.
You're kind of in the middle, and you just start going places
So you
that
hold that sword.
the god or deity tells you to go. You hold up a sword, which is basically a compass that says go this direction, and you'll find your next objective. So, focusing on like I guess like the world aspect for now. The world is, it actually reminds me kind of like a game that does something similar, like Minecraft. Minecraft is like blazingly in depth. You could do a million things with Minecraft, but on its surface, it's just breaking blocks and putting blocks back together in like a first person axe wielding mode. I mean, that's the entire substance of the game. There's like HTML, like internet web versions of Minecraft that just gives you a world randomly generated and says, go do stuff. It's not the full game, but that's basically what it is at its essence. A game like Minecraft, it's just a giant world that's been generated and you do stuff in it.
Well, there is some progression.
You're right. There is some progression. You do meet objectives. You make new items. You get to new places on the map. But similarly, in the same way that Shadow of the Colossus had many things stripped from it, so did Minecraft. And they share the open world that's almost completely accessible to you from the get-go aspect.
Yeah, and I think Shadow of the Colossus definitely pulls it cuts a lot of the chaff from a game structure, but it definitely still maintains enough that it is definitely recognizable as a game and has a pretty similar story progression. It's just heavily expedited. I'd compare it a lot to something like Flower or Flow or Journey.
Exactly. I was going to go there too.
Flower was the first one I thought of.
Because Flower literally has no characters, no interactable characters.
Exactly.
Because if you want to talk about Flow, Flower, Journey, and Shadow of the Colossus in the same way, what I was going to point to at Shadow of the Colossus is there are characters in the game, like named characters. There's your horse. There's the protagonist named Wander, the horse Argo, the girl that you're trying to rescue, Mono, but you don't interact with them. There's no text or dialogue between
You interact
them.
with Argo. Argo's your best friend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you do ride the horse,
Argo.
but there's no dialogue or text or story that's supplemented by the developers. It's all just you're basically square one at the beginning of the game, and the player outside the game, I guess, makes assumptions about what their history is.
I don't in the game, in the context of the game, do they even, other than Wander kind of shouting "Arr!" every once in a while when he wants the horse to come, do they even? They don't even tell you that his name is Wander and that Mono's name is Mono, right?
No, only in the credits of the game. Like once you beat the game, then they're named. Actually, the deity's name is Dorman, and he's named, but everybody else I think is not named, at least in the English version. Like maybe in the maybe in the original Japanese version, there's names and introductions, but in the English version, the one that I played, there's no one named until the end of the game in the credits.
It's weird that they don't give you Wander's name, just because like, you can't think of a clearer sign of an allegory than a character being named something like Wander. Like it would be like if his name were like Justice or Prudence.
Yeah, right. Or
like,
Captain
very clearly,
America.
there's an allegory going on here, but you don't know that if you don't know his name.
Yeah, it is odd, and you learn these things. Like, I mean, I didn't know them until I said this game is freaking great. I love it. Let me learn everything I can about it, and then I had to go learn. So,
yeah, and once you get that name, it definitely makes it a lot clearer that so much of the game can be taken like it's pretty clear that you can take it allegorically regardless, just because it is so stripped down and overcoming all these different challenges is so central. It kind of, much like Journey, it manages to condense the hero's journey into just a series of moments instead of carrying you with a lot of dialogue and kind of padded moments. It's hyper-focused on just getting you from point in your journey
objective to
point.
objective
From
over
Colossus
and over again.
Colossus.
Exactly. So, finishing up some of the parts that sounded about Shadow of the Colossus, we've been over that there's no, I guess, like levels. Like there's no like worlds or levels or towns or cities or dungeons. There's basically no characters that we can interact with as the player besides the man and his horse. We interact with the deity, but they're mostly just like a voice in our head
And
telling us what to do.
And a couple cutscenes.
There's a couple cuts. I mean, you see other people in the game, but they're restricted to cutscenes. Like, this is not even a spoiler, but like 25% the way through the game, you see like a little cutscene that says, "Hey, like there's people that are looking for you because you're doing something that everyone else from your village or wherever you are thinks you shouldn't be doing, so they're coming here to try to stop you," creating essentially like a false sense of there being time as of the essence. Because really, you can put the game down and walk away for 18 hours and no one comes to stop you. But it's part of the story that there are people trying to stop you, but they're also not named. You can't interact with them for 95% of the game. There's basically almost the entire game is just you get orders from a deity that says go defeat this monster, and then when you're done, you get the next set of orders.
Yeah, and it's kind of really interesting that in a world where essentially the only person you're interacting with is occasionally you can walk up to Mono and she's going to be hanging out on that slab.
Right, she's laying down lifeless.
Being dead.
Just doing her thing.
It actually reminds me of something completely different, but related in this sense. And I think it's a relevant point to make. People that are obsessed with like the Star Wars movies know like every supporting character in that movie and like their life story. Think
like
about
the name
the
of the Cantina singers.
Yeah, like all the Cantina singers have names. Like everybody in the Cantina scene, they all have names. And some Star Wars aficionado is going to say, "Oh, well, this is the scene where Blorthog gets bumped into by Han Solo." And you know,
Blorthog
was having a bad day that day. You know, his wife had just cheated on him with some guy from another planet. You know, they apparently know this whole like lore.
Planet.
I don't know.
Like with Steve from Planet Trithorn. Like,
no one cheats on Blorthog.
There's none of that in Shadow of the Colossus. You find it in games like Final Fantasy, maybe. Like there are people walking around in Final Fantasy root towns that are just basically robots walking around, but they're NPCs, and there's some reason for them to be there. You're left to assume that they live there. They maybe have a family there. So even though those NPCs, maybe you can't interact with them, they still support some kind of like environment. There's nothing like that here in Shadow of the Colossus. There's no characters just walking around NPCs. There's no people running the shops you buy your potions from. There's none of that. There's no potions. There's no items, basically. I mean, there are items in Shadow of the Colossus, but they're more like totally non-story related side quests.
And that's actually where I was going to go, was that in this world where there are no people, you basically have no idea about where you are located in a greater world. You seem like you're in this giant tower. there seems to be some structures here or there, but there's no sign of actual civilization beyond the structures left behind.
Correct.
There are animals and plant life.
Yeah, there are lizards.
There are lizards and birds and fish and trees with fruit.
There's a deer too, right?
There is a deer.
But all these different... There are more animals. You can actually interact with the animals, which is
You
kind
can.
of crazy. And you can interact with them in ways that most games don't even allow you to. You can interact with them in ways beyond killing them, which is...
Yeah,
crazy.
normally in some games you just like, oh, welcome to... Can I kill it or can I not kill it? Well, if I can't kill it, that's the end of my interaction.
And
So
it's not like Shadow of the Colossus has a robust system of dialogue or...
No.
You basically have attack, aim with your arrow, and grip. And with these three methods of interaction... And move around. But with these three methods of interaction, they manage to use them in interesting ways to make you have kind of little relationships with each of these pieces of the environment. Like, there's something very cool about jumping off your horse and grabbing a bird and then going for a bird ride. Or, like, shooting a lizard's tail off and then seeing it scurry away. Or, you said you can ride a fish?
you can ride a fish. On your approach to Colossus number... Shoot. I can't think of the exact number now. If it was during the speedrun, I knew like
I think
everything.
it's 9. I think it's the dude who you need to steer around by hitting him in the head.
No, it's not. And that, by the way, that's number 12 anyway.
Oh.
Clearly.
Excuse
The
me.
guy that
Clearly.
it's in the walk up to number 8, I think, which is the Colossi who climbs the walls and you shoot him down on the walls and he like falls into the
the lizard one.
the one who's like the lizard on the
salamander
lizard
looking
guy.
one.
the tail in the pail is what he's referred to by the deity. On your way up there, you gotta like walk through this walk by this little like lake, this like little inside of a mountain lake shrine thing, and you can grab hold of a fish and the fish will just swim around like you're riding a dolphin or something.
Well, dolphins are mammals, though.
Anyway, you know what I mean. Get out of here, Pete. All right, so I guess we beat that point to death a little bit. Like, there is no characters, but there is life in the world.
Which
it's
is
not
really
it's
cool.
not a dead world.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how compelling a story and how much the game makes you feel connected to Wander and feel connected to the world around you without having so many of the trappings that other games employ. I would actually say making it abstract kind of makes it a little bit more universal. And how the game communicates a sense of remorse for killing the Colossi. Everyone I've ever talked to about this game talks about how remorseful they start feeling.
It's kind of sad.
As soon as you start killing Colossi. Even from the first one. Though the first one, it's really when you start getting to the ones that are passive initially, which
really
starts at 2. You start dealing with Colossi that are kind of these passive creatures, not these gigantic monsters necessarily.
Like, there are some that are aggressive and will like actively attack you, and some that are just kind of curiously walking around an area.
Yeah.
2 kind of does it. 2 will attack you. 2 will stomp his feet at you. Colossus number 4, the horse, is really just sort of peaceful in this like hidden grove area. You got to just go find him and murder him. And
Same with
that was
the largest flying one. He never attacks.
in the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sky dragon.
Yeah.
Never attacks.
And like
Arguably the most beautiful one in the game too. Like, that is a gorgeous Colossus.
Oh yeah.
like it's really interesting to me because each of the Colossi seems to have a different general aesthetic. The first one looks like an ogre. The second one looks kind of like a giant. It kind of looks like a horse
Like
monster.
bull or a dog.
And then
It's like a 4-legged creature. Yeah.
Yeah, you get like one that looks like a bird, one that looks like a giant cool dragon, one that
There's
looks
an
like a sea
eel.
serpent.
There's a ram.
There's a snake kind of thing.
Yeah, the snake, number 8. No, that's
Yeah.
number 10. Yeah.
Sand snake.
Number 10, the sand snake.
Sand snake. So each of these colossi, on top of having these general kind of looks that invoke either natural creatures that exist in the world or mythological creatures, they also manage to, in their look, combine artifice and nature in a really interesting way. When you look at a Colossus, their face is often made of stone, and it looks kind of like a mask, with just these eyes that are blue when they're docile, red when they're not. They have no eyelids or anything. They look very much like a mask. But on top of all of those stone, or underneath all those stone outcroppings, you often see flesh and fur and scale.
Yeah.
And it's this odd hybrid of kind of this stone golem look with a natural creature that at first it looks like a monster. They all look like monsters, but when you get up on them, you get the feeling that this is a living thing.
It's very organic.
It combines the organic and the inorganic in a way that I don't see done very often. And it straddles this line between something that's inorganic and thus killing it won't... Like, destroying a robot... Why do games use robots and zombies as the primary enemies so often? It's because...
No one cares about killing them.
Yes,
Yeah, you just wave after wave.
No one cares about killing them. You don't feel bad about it. If anything, you just feel good. And you can give it a T rating because you're not killing something that feels pain. And so the go-to enemies almost always are some sort of inorganic monster, other creature that you don't have to care about. Alien. It can be an alien. It can be literally inorganic. But then once you start adding organic elements, like once you start making it an alien, that's when all of a sudden Halo games start getting M ratings instead of T ratings. Now you're killing things that bleed. And once things bleed, it's something that, I don't know why, but we identify with it a little bit stronger. And Colossi bleed. Colossi at first, like, there is an element to them where you are dealing with this gigantic hulking monster, and it is almost a level unto itself. You are doing so much climbing. All of them have very clear ways
different approaches, different ways to mount them, different ways to hurt them. You have to figure it out like a puzzle.
And you have to climb up them, and oftentimes, like, there'll be like a platform sticking out of a dude's chest and stuff like that. But still, the game...
I mean, usually it's designed to be like a part of their armor or their natural body, but you're right. There are sometimes like ledges to sit on their person. Yeah.
Yeah, or like their tail just has like something that it looks like stone, but it also could be bone that you're climbing up. And it manages to straddle this line between making it permissible to kill a colossi because they seem to be inorganic monstrosities, but also making you feel the impact of killing them. It feels like they are killable, and you're maybe morally justified in doing so, but there is always a regret when you start having to harm these things, because oftentimes when you make the approach on them, their eyes are blue. They do not want anything to do with you. They will ignore you unless you shoot arrows at them. But as soon as you do, their eyes turn red, and oftentimes they will start showing pain. And it's...
I mean, they will whimper and they'll shout, because once you start inflicting damaging hits, they'll like shout and whimper and move away, or they will actually show fear, or they will be frightened from you, or frightened by you. The best example is number 11, which is the one in like the bottom of the crater, like the little dog or like the little ram. Yeah, you have to like scare him away. Like you'll light a torch and you'll wave it at him, and he'll get like afraid of you and back up, and he's very scared before it ultimately leads to him opening up his weakness when he falls down a cliff, because you basically just scare him off of a cliff. It's a very human, I should say human, but very living creature aspect of it, that now you'll feel guilty because you basically are terrifying this defenseless creature.
Yeah, I never thought about it until you brought this up, Gino, but it seems like an interesting sort of revision of sort of Mary Shelley's original Frankenstein. Like if you read the very original Frankenstein, before it got co-opted and sort of, bolts in the side of the neck and all that nonsense.
Are you telling me that is not the authentic?
There's
green skin, high top, high and tight, buzz cut with bolts in the neck is not original Frankenstein?
No,
what are you talking
weirdly
about?
enough, Mary Shelley did not envision that. But like, there's a real question over sort of the humanity of the monster. Like, he's very well spoken. All he really wants is a wife and to be left alone. What do the colossi want? Maybe a she colossi and to be left alone. But there's this real question of sort of the humanity of the monster. That's sort of very present in the way you're describing with the colossi.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because every colossi you go up against, when you're on top of them, you are basically a murderous flea.
Yeah,
but
you're a parasite.
They don't try to kill you when you're on them. They try to shake you off. I can't think of a colossi that will actually swat at you and try to actually pick you off or slam you. Most of the time, they are just shaking. They are trying to get you off of them.
The closest we get to is colossi number 6. I think it's 6. The electric eel will dive to the bottom of the lake, which would drown you. But
it's an eel.
It's really a passive defensive move, not like he's trying to hurt you, but say, I'm going to go somewhere where you can't follow me. Get off of me. Colossi 10 does it too, like when the sand snake goes back underground, you can't hang on to him anymore. And Colossi 13, like maybe they like actively try to get you off of them, but they don't do it by striking you. They just go to some place where you can't follow them.
The sand snake's sort of an outlier, though, and isn't he the one that tries to eat you too? Like
Yes.
None of the other colossi try to eat you.
Yeah, the sand snake definitely is aggressive.
Yeah, he's a bit of an outlier.
Like the guy with the giant sword also will try to.
Colossi 3.
Colossi
Number 3.
3. But
he's my favorite colossi.
Oh, he's great.
He's got a sword.
Right?
And like the
He's
best
awesome.
music too.
And he's huge.
Jesus. He's actually the tallest land colossus besides the final boss.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is you identify with him the most. You understand where he's coming from.
A large man, you know,
with a giant
sort of
stupid
struggling
sword.
in the tiny person's world. I get it.
Yeah, so like some of them are bipeds. They've got 2 arms. They could just grab you and throw you off. But the game, yet again, manages to ride the line between aggression against you and just making these things into kind of animals that are going about their own business. Like, you can feel a sense of fear because when they are shaking you to throw you, if they throw you, you will probably die because you will die from the
Hundreds
fall.
of feet, yeah.
It's terrifying. But also, they are not, plucking you off of their head and throwing you. They ride the line where they are closer to animal and closer to wanting to be left alone than they are some sort of giant or cyclops in mythology, where they are definitely a malicious force. And also, the way that their eyes communicate aggression, or is docility a word?
We can make it a word.
Yeah.
Shakespeare
I
did
think
it.
this-
Docility.
yeah.
The way that it communicates, like, they will flip from aggressive to docile mid-battle. They'll do it. You have just stabbed them 2 or 3 times, and they're like, I hope he's gone.
I mean, yeah, if they shake you off
probably-
and you guys separate, they'll just go back to being normal.
But you can, like, stand on their head, and sometimes they'll just be like, well, I'm not getting stabbed right now. So,
I think the
like,
game is
he's
supposed to like justify that by saying that they don't notice you, or you're not like they don't know you're there if you're standing on one of their stone pieces or something.
I wonder
I
if
guess-
this is where sort of the lack of NPCs comes in too, right? The only other characters you really interact with are Argo, who's a horse, and Mono, who isn't really anything. So I wonder if because you have no other NPCs to compare them to or to interact with, that highlights the humanity of the Colossi. Right?
I mean, it's the only
of,
other thing you can relate to.
exactly, like they're your closest analog within the game at this point.
yeah, and also, like I mentioned earlier with bleeding, like, every time you painstakingly, like, the craft that goes into the animation of stabbing in Shadow of the Colossus, if you just slam on the button, you don't do a lot of damage, and you won't actually take a Colossi down that way. You have to hold the stab button for a really long time and then let off to actually stab them properly.
It's got to be a deep wound.
A conscious stabbing decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There are a lot of times where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold on, but I need to get this stab in. And it is... You have to really, like, think about it. It is not a mashing sort of experience.
No,
You have to
not
really
always.
be deliberate about, do I want to do this? And you have to do it like 9 times to some of these colossi. Just these long, drawn-back stabs. That it's not a David and Goliath sort of
That
thing.
result in you getting showered in black blood.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they are very clearly in pain. They will scream. They will wail. They will start shaking. And like I said, everyone who I've spoken to about this game mentions how terrible you feel. But there's nothing quite as terrible as when this gigantic, once majestic creature crashes to the ground and then just
Collapses dead, yeah.
collapses dead, and just tentacles of darkness shoot out of its body. It loses its coloration. Like, it seemed to almost turn to stone visually, and then you just get jacked up with
They
it.
actually do turn to stone. Like, if you go back to the corpse of a Colossus after you kill it, it's like a stone. It's like mossed over stone. It doesn't have the same form as it did before.
Oh, wow. I never
So
went
that's
back.
actually in the game. If you go
Gino
back to
never
the spot,
looks back. He just
Yeah.
kills and moves on.
if you go back to the spot of the Colossus where you killed it, it'll be like a stone structure. It will have lost its organic life because it's, spoiler alert, like it's gone into you. Like you are absorbing a lot of the spirit from the Colossi after you kill them, which is part of the entire, I guess, motive for Dorman anyway. He's got to be reincarnated through you, so
Yeah.
he's basically just tricking you and taking the life of these Colossi. I mean, they're basically just Horcruxes from Harry Potter. Let's just get real. Parts of Dorman have been split into these beings. Killing them releases his essence into you, then you're reincarnated. So once their life is gone, you're right, they turn back into stone. You can go back and and visit their corpses, which really is nothing more than just time trial mode at that point. You pray next to them and you start time trial mode.
Yeah, you reminisce.
Yeah, you reminisce the fight.
But
So
even in framing time trial mode that way is also significant. You're reminiscing about this
prayer.
thing.
Yeah.
It is a prayer in front of this gigantic defeated body. It's not like you just go into a menu and just hit go.
I mean, the fact that it's a prayer at all
In a game,
says it's separate.
so
Because
I guess this game
sometimes you'll just like jump into an NPC and be like, "Hey, NPC, what's going on?" And he's like, "Hey, my job is to tell you about time trial mode
what up,
and how you
dog?
can get bonuses. Time trial or no time trial. That's all I'm here for."
And I guess there was another way you can interact with the world. You can pray in Shadow of the Colossus.
Exactly. Every save spot you go to, every little shrine is a save spot. Or sorry, every save spot is a small shrine, and you save by praying.
Yeah,
So, like, outside of religion or whatever, this is not what this is about, but it's something that is like a distinctly human and sometimes remorseful act. It's just adding more to the depth.
Wander's never like triumphant in his defeat of a Colossus. Even at the very beginning, before he sort of knows what's going on, it's a very grim sort of mission he's undertaken for himself.
yeah,
It started with an expression of apathy. He just says it doesn't matter.
Yeah, his first discussion with the deity that he makes a deal with is exactly that, Pete. He says, "I don't care, whatever it takes."
It's resigned, if anything else.
yeah, and
You see it towards the end of the game too, like right after Argo falls, before the last Colossus falls to his presumed death. The scene immediately following is him saying, "Well, sorry." He doesn't say anything. He just turns and looks up at where he knows the last Colossus is. You know what? This is the end. Got to just take it to completion.
yeah, and it's amazing how much motivation. I don't know if it's just the way games are structured. You feel motivated to see it through to the end and kill all the Colossi just because this is the way the game is framed, and so this is what you must do. But the game gives you very little motivation beyond the sense of progression. You don't know Mono. You don't know why Wander cares about her. You don't know what this deity is. You don't know why these Colossi need to die.
We assume Wander knows.
Yeah, you assume it.
He wouldn't be there otherwise. You'd have to make an assumption.
It's never explicit.
No.
But this is a great point, Gino. The game itself sort of makes you complicit in this mission by preying on sort of, let's say, our completionist instincts, right? Like, have you ever started a game and said, like, nah, I don't need these extra items. I don't need to finish this. Like, very rarely. So the game uses that and knows, even if you feel bad, you're not going to stop after, like, Colossus 12. Even if you feel this remorse, you're going to say, no, there's 4 more. I got to kill them and see what happens, right? The game uses that to make you complicit. Man, that's some next-level psychologizing going on.
And it reminds me of a quote from one of the lead designers of Magic the Gathering, oddly enough. I listened to a podcast. It's the Drive to Work podcast with Mark Rosewater. You should check it out if you are interested in game design at all. A lot of the stuff is Magic the Gathering specific, but he has just some great points on game design. And one of them is, however you structure your game, however you design it, your player will do whatever they feel needs to be done in order to win. regardless of whether that is fun, regardless of whether that is enjoyable, they will do what they need to do to perceive whatever they perceive to be the way to victory. They will figure it out and do it. And if you make them do something that they do not like, they will blame you for making this game this way. And they will not necessarily think, well, maybe there's another way I can play this game that would have been more enjoyable. Shadow of the Colossus uses that just perfectly because it is directing you down a pathway that is melancholy by design and remorseful by design, and just says all we need to do is set up this progression structure, and players will see it through. They'll do it because this is the way games tell you to do things, and it kind of flips. A lot of games, when people talk about games that aren't fun, they often talk about games that make you do things that are like This War of Mine. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a game about people who are trapped in a besieged city during, I think it's supposed to be set in one of the Balkan Wars. But basically people are trapped in the city and you have to survive by looting or potentially killing or making your way with these people who are kind of depressed. And the game is not fun. It is not an enjoyable experience, but the game is trying to communicate what it is like to be in this terrible situation. And it uses game mechanics to do so. And I think Shadow of the Colossus does that too. It kind of teaches you the remorse of meaningful death. Like things that die in Shadow of the Colossus, there are 16 things in the world that are unique beyond Wander and Mono. Like there are a couple of animals, but there are 16 unique, gigantic, majestic creatures, and every one of them you take out of the world is never replaced. There is no random spawn. Nothing is coming to kind of give this world meaning afterwards. And it is a great design trick that they use.
I mean, it's almost like a small, like, genocidal, like, extinction mission.
Yeah. It brings...
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
It brings back sort of our mereological questions, too, because you get very little motivation, right? Just, this will bring back Mono? Maybe? Let's do it. It's like, what's the minimum motivation you need to give a gamer for them to pursue your intended project?
Is there any way we can make a list of what needs to be in a game in order for it to be a game? Because going back to your like Drive to Work podcast example, those guys at MTG said, people are going to do whatever it takes to win a game. Why is that? It's because it's a game. I mean, if it was a movie, you're not trying to win a movie. If the movie starts sucking, you just turn the movie off. Like, this movie's garbage. I'm done. Same with like a TV series. If you watch a TV series and it gets to episode 6 and it's horseshit, leave. Stop watching the show. But a game's got something different. You're trying to win. Like I'm trying to win checkers too. But if I mean, I guess maybe I flip the table when I start losing. But you're trying to win if it's a game.
90% of Monopoly games never get finished.
Yeah, right? Because Monopoly just ends up being miserable after a while. So, what is a game? Like, what does the game have to have in order for us to call it a video game? And we should make it a video game.
That's that video.
Well, yeah. First of all, you have to have some kind of image, or else, I mean, you have to have something
Audio
interactive.
Game?
No, I've actually there's a game that I don't remember the name of it. But it is completely...
Because it doesn't exist.
No, it's completely in the dark. It's a game where you are completely in the dark, and...
You sure you're not completely in the dark, Gina?
Yes. I'm sure that I'm not...
Maybe your monitor was broken and you played a game on extra hard mode. Hardest mode
This game is really hard.
Jesus, this is a hard game.
Look, maybe you don't play Final Fantasy IX that way, but I don't need to look anymore.
There was...
No, you don't.
I remember hearing a story about a guy who played this one fighting game. He happened to be blind and he could play just by the sound effects. Yeah. I don't remember what the game was.
One of the most interesting things that I saw, and I was with Gino when we saw this, was a guy who played Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time blindfolded.
Really?
Because he memorized every level design, and based on the sounds of what like Link made when he was moving through the world, he knew like, oh, I'm up against this wall. I'll swing my sword. If it makes this sound, I know I'm up against a wood structure or up against a stone structure.
That's terrifying.
Okay, I found 2 games. The one that I was thinking of is In the Pit. It is a game where I believe, you're
in a pit.
You're in a pitch black.
Spoiler alert.
You're in a pitch black area basically, and you can't see anything, but every time you move, you can hear your footsteps, and you can hear there's a monster in the pit with you, and you can hear it. So you can't see anything. You can hear your footsteps. You can hear if you're up against a wall or something. So imagine like it's kind of a walking around in a cave simulator.
Right. Okay.
And then there's also Johann Sebastian Joust, which is another.
Johann Sebastian Joust.
Yes, I don't know if you've seen this game, but
I hope it's like a Knight's Tale movie. Like you just go jousting and you can't see anything, so you just hope you hit the target.
In the background.
You actually did see it, Billy, at PAX.
Did I?
It is a game you play with PlayStation Move controllers on the PlayStation 3. You just have the Move controller. It looks like an ice cream cone. And what happens is they play some
important gaming information.
Johann Sebastian Bach music in the background. And when the music's playing, you're allowed to move.
Oh, I did see it.
And when the music stops, you have to stop.
So like red light, green light, but with music?
Yes, but the goal is to knock... You are jousting with everyone else who's playing. So if you get them to move in a way that's too erratic, they are knocked out of the game. So
that actually sounds pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. I've seen people throw chairs. That's next level.
That's playing to win.
Next level joust. Okay, so we have like a question that we haven't really been able to give a lot of thought to so far, but let's just jump right in. Like, what do we need for a video game to be a video game? We've said, all right, maybe you can take away a visual experience, but that might be a real stretch. I think you're probably going to have some kind of... Okay, but then I might not call it a video game. I might call it a game. Because, like, you know that game like Simon, where you like push the buttons in order. You can play that game without being able to see because all the things make a different sound. You know, you just have to know which sound is where on the cardinal direction before you start playing, and then you can play it blindfolded. It's a game.
But it's
I can play chess blind. I can play checkers blind, but...
I can't play chess blind.
Well, I'm not saying I can, but somebody could. They'd be like knight to h3 or something, and they would know where the piece is moving.
You don't want your knights on the side of the board, because then they control fewer squares.
Whatever.
You want something like knight to f3.
Fine. So...
Step your chess game up.
If we're gonna call it a video game, if we're gonna call it a video game, we might as well lay down some ground rules.
I don't think video is essential. I think if most people, when I've heard discussions of this, usually people talk about a win state or a fail state. That a game must have a situation in which you win, and some way in which you can lose. But beyond that, I don't know that you need much more. Other than if you say that there's also maybe a base requirement that it has to run on some sort of computer, some sort of hardware, to be considered a video game. I don't know what else you actually need, because I can think of counterexamples.
You're going to need some kind of control mechanism.
Yes.
It's going to be a keyboard, controller, it can be movement, it can be whatever. But you as a human have to make causal chain interaction with stuff that's happening in the game.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's a movie.
Yep. And I think one of the major parts of a game are that, like you said, there needs to be some kind of input. And also, I think that a game has to kind of be incomplete until a person comes along and starts playing it. Like, you can't necessarily come to a game and have it all be explained like a movie if you hit play and then walk away.
Yeah. Games can't play themselves.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 13.
I mean, it plays itself for parts, but then you need to press something to keep moving.
Yeah. So
because like even if you had a game that was entirely just sort of God of War cutscenes, where you just like hit X to advance sort of the plot.
QuickTime advances. They're called QuickTime events.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we could consider that a game either, just because there's causal interaction, but in the simplest sense. Like basically, you're just hitting the play button on the VCR and stopping and starting.
But then,
and if you miss your cue, like the reel runs out and you have to reset it.
Yeah.
I mean, it actually makes more sense like if it's like a film reel that you don't change the reel in the right amount of time. Like the reel's gonna disconnect and like the film would start flapping around in a circle because you didn't change the reel at the right time.
Yeah, but I mean, then we'd be speaking to like a 50-year-old plus audience who knows.
I mean, okay, sorry, I know.
Reels are.
I don't know.
I don't know if you heard my introduction for Billy, but he is old man.
Yeah, right.
Old man.
That's a good point.
Jesus.
Um,
Oh, touche.
But so would you think like games that are branching dialogue trees, like Depression
Sort of the
Quest?
create your own adventure stuff?
Yes.
Like the dating sims that I like to play.
Yes,
Mhm.
like
Walking Dead.
some kind of kanojo game. That's Japanese for girlfriend.
Would they count? I don't know.
I think so.
What's that one about pigeons?
I would say so.
Oh, the pigeon dating sim?
That pigeon dating game.
Oh.
Wait, are you
They-
are you a pigeon or are you a person dating?
You are a human courting pigeons.
Yes.
So
I
you
forget
just
what it's called.
like proceed? Like
It's
how hard is
called-
it to court a pigeon?
It's real hard.
Really?
It's called something
Hatoful
girlfriend.
boyfriend.
Like hotiful boyfriend.
Yes. You are
It's a pigeon dating sim.
You are the last woman in a world full of pigeons. And well, no,
So-
world full of birds. Birds have taken over the world, and you are a girl. You live in a cave outside of town, and you have to pick between all these different birds that
Pigeon
lust
suitors.
after you.
The solution there is to die alone. That should be the plot of the game. It should be a dying alone simulator.
Oddly enough, there are several options. There are several endings to the game.
Yeah.
Several of which are dying.
That would be the like everything else should be considered losing the game. Like if you marry a flamingo, you've lost.
You've lost the game.
Yes, but I think getting back on point. That's a game.
How do we get back on point
I
now?
was gonna say we weren't
Jesus.
talking about bird dating. That was like the only thing I came here for.
Better than cockfighting.
Yeah,
All right.
I think that's a game. I think Hatoful Boyfriend's a
great.
game. I think
What do we
Oh,
need
it's a weird
to make a game?
I think it's literally just interactivity to progress the game, and there has to be I don't know if
Is
there
it
even has to
really
be a finite
interactive?
endpoint.
I don't know if it's interactive because you only have options. Like someone just gives you like A, B, or C. Choose.
That is interactive.
I don't think it's. I don't think it's interactive. I think it's maybe just like active.
But the
But
game
I-
progresses because you did something. So it is.
Maybe I'm making a bad like distinction. I'm not
Yeah, I
making
think
the
you are.
distinction correctly.
I think you
I
are.
agree. You are doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
You're just chopping up words now.
Maybe.
I don't think it's interactive. I think it's interact. You know, I don't think it has that tiv there at the end.
Who's chopping up words now?
We I mean, I guess the question we took a step back would be to ask if we entered or had entered, at least at the time of sort of Shadow of the Colossus, a postmodern period of game design. Like it seems like all sort of mediums progress through these progressions, you know, pre-modern, modern, postmodern. Are we now postmodern gaming?
We're probably in postmodern gaming.
Why
Actually.
don't you explain postmodernism for people who might not, or maybe who haven't studied
Good
it
luck.
in a few years?
Sure. So the simplest way to understand postmodernism is as a skepticism about meta-narratives. So which, as an explanation, probably also requires some explanation. So meta-narratives are just sort of the idea that you have these overarching justifications for things, right? Like, to say something like all games should include swordplay, that would be a meta-narrative, right? It's something that's true about all games. All games should include unlockable achievements. That's also a meta-narrative. So to say that we've entered a postmodern era of game design would say that we're skeptical about these sort of meta-narratives. We're skeptical about any claims that say all games should have X or should do Y, right?
Mhm.
We've sort of, let's say, broken the rules, right? We don't need rules anymore.
I think that Shadow of the Colossus definitely was one of the more ambitious games that took a kind of postmodern skid on games, because there was a lot of money poured into Shadow of the Colossus, and it was very successful, very high profile. Most of the
Yes, it
time,
was.
the games that are taking these risks are indie games on small budgets, released
It's
for
actually
nothing.
more of a sequel. Like Shadow of the Colossus was the second game made by one development company. Eco comes first, and I've actually been mispronouncing it. It's supposed to be pronounced Eco.
Is Eco really?
Yeah, I don't like it, but
Japanese,
it's
son.
technically Eco.
Means good child.
Yeah, I didn't know if it
So-
was mono or mono either. So was
I
like,
think
that's
it's
just
I
really
think it's
short.
I think it's mono.
Yeah, it's mono. You're right.
If it's Japanese, it's mono.
But Eco, in the same way, was extremely minimalist. You had this beautiful world that you had one objective. You are with a girl, drag her out of a castle. And so what is actually required for it to be a video game? All we've got, like I said, and pretty much all that Shadow of the Colossus has too, is a character, or sorry, I should say like maybe avatar is the better word, because you wouldn't call what you are in Flower a character,
Maybe you
but
wouldn't.
you are like an entity. You are the agent
With your
doing something.
speciesism, flowers are people too, Billy.
Sure, fine.
It's a collection of petals. Actually, you play as the wind, so.
Um,
You'd be
and
surprised if
in
it's
Flow, you are just basically like a germ that eats other little germs. So it doesn't have to be a person, but you could be like the agent, the player character, the player agent. There has to be some kind of player agent, and maybe some kind of goal or win condition. Sure, and a control mechanism like a console, keyboard, whatever that lets you connect player to player agent with the aim of reaching your goal or reaching your win condition.
But I think that
maybe that's all we can say is a video game.
But I think we can even refine from there, because with games like Minecraft and some of the other kind of sandbox games that have come out recently, I think you don't even necessarily need an established goal.
No, you don't really need a win condition
or an end condition. You just need some way to interact with the game and assist a series of interactions that will come as a result of the player agent acting upon the world. As long as the player can set up some sort of motivation and win condition, it seems like that's enough.
That actually reminds me of games that have what's it called, like karma trees, like make the good decision or bad decision.
Like Fallout.
Yeah, kind of. But the game that came to mind for me was Splinter Cell Double Agent, which is like a really obscure game. I mean, it was kind of an afterthought of the original series, but almost every mission has 2 win conditions. You can do like this win condition or this other win condition. It's like you can either assassinate this guy, or you could just steal important information that he has so he can't use it against anybody, or you could just kill him so he doesn't
use it against
open his mouth, or like you could be good guy or bad guy, and you got to choose. So there's definitely like radically different win conditions. You could go either way if you want to. So maybe you're right. Maybe win condition has to get thrown out.
And if you throw that out, then it's just an ability to interact with some sort of digital media, and interactivity is the only requirement, which I think is the most interesting definition of a game, because then you can get into how much interaction do you really need? What kinds of interactions count?
Yeah, because then if we're just talking about interactivity, I mean, unless you brought in sort of medium, then you could talk about anything as a video game. Like doing laundry could be a video game. I'm interacting with the laundry machine.
I don't know if you've worked in a corporate environment, but working can be a game.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought so.
Achievements, son. Yeah, so I think Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah,
what a game.
Proves work as a game. That's the message.
I'm thinking of other games that also subtract a bunch from their model.
I think
some that come to mind.
Is the other high-profile one on the PS3.
Portal's like that. Portal's basically just every room is a puzzle, solve it. You've got one character, yourself, and maybe GLaDOS. And there's like turrets and junk, right?
I haven't played Proteus, but Proteus is a pretty weird thing.
Slender was kind of high profile for a while. That was basically just you and the Slender Man
hanging out.
Thinking of Limbo is like that too. Limbo was kind of high profile.
I was thinking of Minesweeper whenever we were bringing up Minecraft.
Minesweeper is also a video game, I guess, like Solitaire or something. I don't know. But Solitaire is completely non-video game. You can play it without any of those things. It's actually a card game.
Is it?
Oh,
is it Solitaire started as a card game?
What? Oh man, look at me right now. So smart.
Okay. Well, I think we're winding down on Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, we've said everything we need to say about that game in particular. I think
I'm really glad I had, we could talk about this. Like, Shadow of the Colossus was definitely a watershed moment for me in what games could do and how they could approach things. And it definitely, if you're playing games now, like look at something like I think Titan Souls is the name of it. It is
Titan Soul.
Titan Souls is a kind of distillation of Shadow of the Colossus and Demon Souls. Death is a major mechanic, and it is, like Shadow of the Colossus, a series of boss fights, each of which are against a single enemy. And you have, again, a very limited moveset. Though I don't think it to my knowledge, I don't think it tries to humanize the enemies quite as much as Shadow of the Colossus does. But
I would agree.
games are starting. A lot of games took their lessons from Shadow of the Colossus, and it, I think, led to. It was one of the watershed moments in like, wow, this game is approaching what games can do from a really different perspective from games around it. And so I think it's a great game. You should check it out if you haven't. It's real cheap. You can get it for the
Especially
PS3.
since this got like the HD remastered version is gorgeous.
It's only a couple hours. Like, replay it, people. That game's still good.
Do we have any other points we want to hit? Anywhere in mereology or game discussion?
I just wanted to say what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks, because I'm going to be...
Yeah, please do.
I'm going to be pitching a game. I think, if you guys are okay with it, I would like to do Psychonauts, which is one of my favorite games of all time, and it was the game's 10-year anniversary, just, I believe, this week.
Yeah, I can get on board.
So,
It's absurd that we've been friends for so long and you haven't made me play that game. You basically talk about it every time I see you.
You do. You're
And-
obsessed with Psychonauts.
It's
Absolutely
so
obsessed with
good.
that game. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Also, I may or may not have ordered some Psychonauts merit badges because it was the 10-year anniversary.
But, oh my
I
god.
may or may not have them in the next room over. So if you guys could play through that game by,
Yeah,
I guess,
try
next
to.
week, or not next week, 2 weeks from now, we could,
About 10 to 12 days, sure. Sure.
give you guys some time. That game is real cheap. So if any of you listening would like to be a little bit more up to date and involved with the discussion, you can go ahead, play through Psychonauts or remember it, get some stuff together. If you want to contact any of us, if you want to contact the podcast, you can shoot an email to thatpinguino@gmail.com. Thatpinguino, like my YouTube name and my Giant Bomb name and my Twitter handle, at gmail.com. I will be sure to read any and all emails and any feedback, any comments, anything from Shadow of the Colossus that you would like us to talk about, next podcast, just to maybe get your points in. We could probably incorporate that into before we get into the next game.
We could do like a few minutes of if people have like some important Q&A, we could
Or
dedicate a
feedback.
couple
Get some good
couple
questions.
minutes.
Yep, and
That would at least be cool to link together the podcast a little bit.
yep. So I don't know if the format's going to always be us three or if we're going to vary up the roster a little bit. I am always open to changing up the format a little bit. So till next time, thank you for listening. Psychonauts is going to be so fun. Oh my god. I haven't had anyone to talk to about that game because
It's
most
painfully obvious.
people haven't
Yeah, right.
played as much as I have. You need to play.
Your fiance is not going to listen.
No, she's not going to listen
You know,
at all.
sitting in front of that picture in his living room, just, oh my god, Psychonauts.
Just because I have an autographed poster and a T-shirt and some merit badges doesn't mean I'm obsessed with the game.
No, not in the least.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation about Shadow of the Colossus. Till next time, thank you for listening, and this was Deep Listens.
Yep.
Deep
Yes, it
listens.
was.
Deep Listens.
Deep listens. Round 1. Deep listens, volume 1.
Thank you. Peace.